Welcome once again, and this is the Cow Report coming to you live from beautiful downtown L.A. Phillips Memorial Library. And as usual, with me is my rusty, trusty sidekick, Fred Stafford. And glad that you could make it tonight's program, Fred. We missed you last week. We had
Yes.
search parties out looking for you, and we're glad that you found your way down here tonight.
Well, they switched. You should have been on at 9 o'clock, and they were on at 2.
Well, Betty couldn't find you anywhere. We had search parties out, and you know it's only about 2 miles from here to your house, so we couldn't find you anywhere. But as usual, we're coming to you live, and we're glad to see you're back, Fred. And we want to thank the viewers for tuning in tonight. And with us tonight, we have a special guest all the way from Stevens Point, and his name is Scott West, and he is a candidate for the 7th Congressional District. Welcome to the program, Scott.
Thank you very much, Chuck.
Glad to be here, and thanks for driving all the way over from Stevens Point tonight.
Well, it was a beautiful drive right through the 7th District. I wouldn't miss it. It brings back good memories of the last campaign and making our way across the 19 counties of the 7th District.
And that is a big district up there, isn't it?
It is one of the largest in the nation, and also one of the most beautiful in the nation. So we really are blessed.
Well, I was an independent candidate in the 3rd district, and we thought that was big, but you look at the 7th, and it's just about as big. It's a little more of a box, but the 3rd district's long and narrow, whereas the 7th is kind of a square.
Well, I'll tell you what, during the campaign, you normally get up about 5 in the morning, and you jump in the car, and 5 hours later, you're somewhere in the district.
Right.
And so we did a lot of traveling.
And that gets to be pretty rough when you might travel 5 hours for one event and then have to travel all the way back.
Which you do all the time. You're
Right.
doing that all the time. But we always try to, because we're making our way across the district, we try to make our way into every town you can think of in the 7th District to stop in and have coffee and talk to people and do more listening than talking.
Okay, Scott, you almost beat Dave Obey, 25-year incumbent at the time. I think he's going on 26 years now, up in the 7th District. He appears to be beatable. Why did you decide to get in the race last time? And well, first of all, before we get into the race, I'd like to get a little of your background. Where are you originally from? And
well, I was born in Wisconsin Rapids, and I live in Stevens Point, and I'm a university administrator at UW-Stevens Point. So I've been an educator ever since I graduated in the early 80s, and have worked at Stevens Point really most of my life as an educator and administrator. And several students, I teach some leadership classes at UW-Stevens Point in the communication department, and several of my students came to me after a class and said, Scott, why, instead of complaining about the issues, why don't you start practicing what you teach, which is leadership? And at Stevens Point, we teach that leaders are first servants. And before you can become a leader, you first have to be a servant. Mm-hmm. And the moment you forget that you're a servant is the moment you give up every kind of leadership opportunity available to you. So I started to practice what I teach. And decided to run for the United States Congress.
Okay, you graduated from, you even graduated from
UW-Stevens Point.
All right. And you got a master's degree from Stevens Point.
All but thesis.
All right. Okay, and now you're in the student activities. So basically you have students that come in from around the state and possibly the country and world looking at UW-Stevens Point to decide where they're going to go. You try and make up their mind to go to.
Exactly. We and it's a very easy sell. We are so fortunate in Wisconsin to have the kind of UW system that we have. I mean, the kind of school system that we have is incredible, and so it's a very easy sell. And so when students come to Stevens Point to take a look at our campus, my job is to help them understand the Stevens Point story, to understand what Stevens Point is about, and try to find the right match, whether it's Stevens Point or UW-Eau Claire or another UW system school.
Now, Stevens Point is kind of centrally located, so there's always a lot of conferences, state conferences, national, and there's a few insurance companies have their headquarters there. It's a nice location. I know there's a lot of good workshops that are held in that area. But so, a couple years ago, all of a sudden, you woke up one morning and said, I'm going to run for United States Congress against a 25-year incumbent. So then what'd you do?
Well, my gosh, we started planning immediately, and this is what we knew about Congressman Obie. That one, he's a winner. I mean, in the fact that he wins all the time. No other congressional challenger has ever received more than 38% of the vote when going up against David Obie. And so we knew we had a lot of work ahead of us. And we also knew that he had a lot of money. He typically spends $400,000 to $500,000 in a given race against his challenger. In our race, he spent $900,000. I spent $125,000. And so we knew we couldn't outspend him, so we had to outsmart him. And part of the process of outsmarting Dave Obie, which is a very difficult task, is to go throughout the district and get to know people and talk to people and talk to every Kiwanis group we can talk to and every Optimist club we can talk to and every church group that we can visit with and every farm bureau that would take us in. We were there. And every veterans group as well. We made our way throughout the 19 counties of the 7th District and shared our message and listened diligently to the people that we hope to serve. And we also brought in some of the, I think, some of the greatest political minds around. One of our consultants, our pollster, is Frank Luntz. And Frank Luntz has, a matter of fact, he called me about a month ago and said, hey, let's get moving on this. We're ready for you. And Frank Luntz was the pollster for the Contract with America, and he's also Newt Gingrich's pollster. And so now he's Scott West pollster again.
And the national media claims he's one of the brightest minds in politics today, and in polling.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And if you meet him, you immediately like him. But I'll tell you what, when we first met Frank Luntz, I emerged after a 6-hour meeting bruised and battered. I mean, I was thrown around the room. He challenged every thought I had, getting me ready for the campaign. We won. We won those challenges, but he is a phenomenal consultant, and I think he's one of the most knowledgeable political consultants in the business.
Okay, so when you're out there now, Frank was the architect of the Contract with America. Newt bought into it right away, and you were actually one of the signers on the Capitol steps of the Contract with America before the November election.
Yes, I went out. That was about 3 weeks before the election, and we had visited Washington several times to get to know the landscape and also understand the leadership in Washington, D.C. that would assist us in winning in the 7th District. And so one of those visits, the last visit to Washington, was with the Contract with America. And we spent 3 days in meetings, visiting with each other and getting to know the contract very well. Now, we had already seen the contract for a long time before that. And on that morning, we, all 300 of us signed the Contract with America. Sonny Bono was right in front of me. I was witness to Sonny Bono signing the contract.
He wasn't humming "I Got You, Babe" or anything.
No humming. No humming this time.
Okay, now, did anyone ever run the figures through to see out of that 300 how many were elected?
A great majority of that 300. I mean, it was. That's what made this race so unique. That the people that were there that signed the Contract with America either won or did better than anybody else in the history of those individual campaigns. And we were a part of that. We were a part of that.
I was going to say now, okay, you're kind of a upstart coming out of nowhere running, and you're running against one of the most powerful men in the Congress. He's the chairman of, I think it's the Appropriations Committee?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Just at that time, he was the chairman. And to a lot of people, they're saying to themselves, well, I'm going to roll the dice and I'm going to go with Obie because he's one of the most powerful men and we don't want to lose that power in Washington.
Exactly.
But even up against those odds of him being one of the handful of the most powerful men, you came within, I would say, probably $20,000 in maybe 10 days of beating him.
in reflection, I mean, the day after the election, we ran some numbers. We were taking a look at each county and each township one by one, taking a look at all the voting figures, and we've come to the conclusion, along with Frank Luntz's help, that with about $20,000 more spent in Eau Claire and spent in Superior, I would be in Washington today. And by the way, no one thought this could be done. No one thought this could be done. And we said it could be done from the very beginning. And the so-called political experts out there in the field said, there's no way you can do this, there's no way you can raise $125,000, and you'll never get over 38% of the vote. We knew we could do it because we counted, not on television, we counted, although television played a major part at the very end, we counted on people power, going door to door, people visiting with others in their living room and over the kitchen table. We counted on really working to outsmart Congressman Obey and his tactics. And as a result, here are the numbers. And very few people, I think, realize how close we were. In 25 years, no one's ever gained over 38% of the vote against Congressman Obey. We gained almost 47% of the vote, almost 47. In Wausau, in Marathon County alone, we beat Obey by 5,000 votes. That's never been done before. In my county, Portage County, and we located our headquarters in Stevens Point, right in the heart of the most liberal county in Wisconsin, Portage County. We put our headquarters there for a reason. We wanted to let the people of Portage County know that one of their own was running against Congressman Obey. And in that county, where we normally lose by 15,000 votes, we lost by less than 100. So we came within 100 of winning. We made up 15,000 votes in Portage County. We won Wood County, and in Lincoln County, where we normally lose by 6,000 votes, we lost by less than 23. So wherever our TV commercials ran, and wherever we spent the greatest amount of time, we either won or came close to winning.
Well, I was campaigning down in La Crosse and other places, but I heard about the steam that was building behind your campaign, and they're saying he could pull this out. And I know you were pushing there, and you couldn't get much closer than that, especially against somebody like Obey.
And I think it's had a wonderful effect. In many ways, we won that race. In many ways, in the end, we may have lost the final number only by a few percentage points. Out of 200,000 voters, we were 13,000 from winning, which is easily made up with another $20,000. But so we may have lost. We may have lost the big number at the end, but we won in so many other ways. Congressman Obey has never been back to the 7th District as much as he is today. So for the first time in about 10 years, as a result of our campaign, in your campaign, Congressman Obey is visiting his home district more often.
Okay, now,
I don't know if he's listening, but he's visiting more often.
I think he's still in town. Well, maybe he's on his way back to Washington. He was on a radio station here in town last Monday. You've got 3 major media buy areas in that district. You got Duluth Superior, you got the Eau Claire, and Wausau. Takes a lot of money to put on a media campaign. Is that where most of Obey's 900,000 went?
Oh, Congressman Obey was spending about $20,000 to $30,000 a week in all the major markets, in those 3 markets, for about 4 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks. So that's where a lot of his money went. He also spent a great deal of money on polling. He had to find out what the voters were thinking, because he's not back here very often. So he had to hire a pollster to find out what people were thinking. And even then, I mean, I imagine he found out the same information I did. Even then, he has voted against those same issues that the people of the 7th District voted for and want.
Well, speaking of the the upcoming race, which you probably already started.
Oh, we're, the day after the election is when we started this one.
Okay. Now, the Wisconsin Review, it's a conservative paper that Bob Welch, who ran for U.S. Senate, he is the acting editor of right now. The editor of the Wisconsin Review, Bob Welch. And in the June-July 1995 issue, there is a preliminary discussion about the 9 congressional races already. Incidentally, I guess in the year 2000, we could very well see this go back to 8 congressional districts in Wisconsin because of the loss of population. And so your district, I understand the 3rd district's one that's going to be cut out, so the 7th district will be spared, but it'll look differently after the the year 2000 census. But anyway, going to the 7th district, a Robin Newshawk, Wisconsin Review investigative reporter, says in the July issue, a surprising Republican primary for the right to challenge previously untouchable Dave Obey. 1994 challenger Scott West did very well and will run again. State Senator Dave Zine of Chippewa and Eau Claire will ride his Harley-Davidson and play on his strong populist message to provide perhaps the most interesting congressional challenge in the country. Plus, an as yet unannounced dark horse from the Wisconsin Rapids area. Look for Obey to pull every trick out of his very significant bag of them and to spend perhaps a cool $1 million in defense of his seat. Remember that he is still the -- Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, and if Dems can somehow wrestle control away from Newt Obey is in a position to make a special interest life miserable. So it says that Obey is prepared to spend $1 million this time. Can he raise that much? Since he spent $900,000 last time, can he come back in now as a minority member?
Well, you know what? I never underestimate David Obey. I mean, this man has won for 25 years. He has a recipe for winning. So I don't underestimate him. And people have called him vulnerable before. I think of all the years he's been in office, this is the most vulnerable he has been. But I don't discount him. I think he's a very powerful player. And the Democrats want to hold on to as many seats as they can hold on to, so they may just make sure that he has the money he needs to launch and keep a campaign going that will allow him to continue that seat. I don't think he'll have the kind of money coming in from PAC organizations and special interest groups that he had when he was appropriations chair. But I think he'll raise the money somehow.
Well, the money tends to flow that way when you're in a powerful position like that. Everybody wants to buy a piece of the action.
Yeah, I wish you know, the Milwaukee Journal came in to do a report on our money raising efforts, and they came in. They spent a whole day with me, just traveling the road with me and visiting with our constituent groups. And they said, well, how much have you raised? And I brought out my FEC report, which is about this thin, and then I brought out a copy of Obey's, which we were getting regular copies of, and his copy was at least 1,000 pages. It was huge. And as we take a look at those, at that amount of money coming in, it's coming from out of state. It's not coming in from Wisconsin.
Yeah, the incumbents tend to get the money. I know against Steve Gunderson, he had one that was not that thick, but I would use it in my debates with him. I would pull it out and just keep stretching the computer paper and keep stretching it, and it was all money from PACs from around the country.
Oh, yeah.
Sugar lobbyists, Tyson Foods, just every agricultural committee you could think of was throwing money at Gunderson because of the incumbency. And you study it, and the incumbents over 90% of the time win, and it's because of that serious lobbyist money that's poured into them. Are you for campaign reform? It's one of the issues that was big in the last election. I'm sure it will be again. How do you...
I am definitely for campaign reform, not just because I went through this either. I've always been for campaign reform because of what that money does to incumbents. And I think I think it happens with Republican and Democratic incumbents alike. When you've been there for a long time, not necessarily even a long time, and you are required to go out and raise the kind of money that you need to raise to win an election, and that means either going back to your district and having receptions and parties and fundraisers left and right, or that means making a phone call or accepting a phone call from a lobbyist who also has a check. I think even some of the most decent people can be corrupted. And I think we need to make sure that we begin to reform election laws and make sure that we keep decent people decent.
Well, we've got a couple of calls stacked up here, so we're going to start intermingling calls with discussions on the various issues. And there's a fistful of issues to talk about in the upcoming race. There's always issues to talk about. And before we get to the phone, though, I wanted to get a little housekeeping out of the way. I don't know if you ever met this gentleman. I think this year is his 82nd birthday. He's an old war horse from the Eau Claire County Republican Party. He was chairman a couple times. His name is Gordy Sill, and his birthday is July 17th, so we wanted to say happy birthday to Gordy. And he was the recipient this year at the State Republican Convention of the Bovee Award.
Yes.
In 1995, and I guess it was unanimous that him and his wife were chosen for that award. But Gordy helped put some decent conservative Republicans in office, both nationally and on the state scene during his reign. And even though Gordy personally is pro-abortion, he helped pro-life candidates get in there. And that's something that you have to give Gordy.
Well, that's a well-deserved, or is that a well-deserved award? I'm chairman of the Republican Party in Portage County, and so I know what Gordy and his whole family have gone through to try to organize Republican parties in our counties and make sure that we support candidates. And sometimes it can be one of the most thankless jobs. But when you think about what's at stake, it becomes the most wonderful job. So I congratulate Gordy and his family for that award.
He's somebody who's been in there for many, many years. And like him or don't like him, he's a war horse, and he'll get in there and work for you. So we're going to take a call here on line 1, and we'll start with you. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, Chuck. How you doing?
Okay, how are you tonight?
Pretty good. I got a couple comments for both you and Fred. But first of all, I have a comment for you. Have you heard about Leader Telegram's latest attempt to throw your bid for Congress?
No, I haven't heard about that yet.
Well, they're trying to make you look like, like you like men, like you're a homosexual.
Well, I didn't know that, but the issue is not on that tonight. Would you like to ask Scott a question about the 7th Congressional District race?
Well, first of all, I'd like to ask Fred, when are they taking them back to the home?
Okay, go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Yeah, Chuck, this is Joe from Eau Claire. I got a question for Scott.
All right.
Scott, I visited your office a couple times last year in Stevens Point, and I actually provided you with some product there. And I like what you're doing, but I hope you excuse me for taking this opportunity to, I've got an outstanding debt from October from your campaign that I'd like to collect, and I'm just wondering if you can give me the information to do that with, because your P.O. box is closed and your phone numbers are shut down, the old office.
Well, we can get your name off the air, and you can deal with that. I'm sure it's just an oversight. These campaigns, I'm still paying off a phone bill from the November election.
Well, I'd appreciate it if I could get it off the air then.
Okay, did you have a question on any of the issues?
Other than that, Scott, I think that you stand for good things, and good luck next year.
Well, you know, and I am appreciative of that, because we don't want to. Candidates have a when you're running these campaigns, and believe me, the bills are flying, because you're printing and you're distributing and you're buying TV time, and we certainly don't want to overlook and miss something that important. So I would appreciate off the air us dealing with this, and I'll make sure that this is taken care of.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
that's no biggie. That happens in every race. There's always some bills are bigger than others, but some just fall through the cracks, and you don't see them. And I know you're busy. I tried to get a hold of you for about a week, and the best place I found was to call you at work, leave a message, and then you get back to me. But I would say you're probably on the go quite a bit.
Day and night, and so unfortunately some of these things fall through the cracks, and I want to make sure that this one didn't do that, and so thank you for calling.
Okay. I think we got one more call on line one, and then we'll get into some of the issues that'll be upcoming in this race. Go
Oh
ahead.
my God, I'm on the air.
Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Oh my God, I'm on the air. Could you believe it?
Okay. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I want to know, is it true that you used to do cocaine, crack, you know?
No, that's not true. Do we have a call on line two? Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Yeah, who's that fucking fairy in the...
Well, we
This all must be from the same family
Well-
of callers.
what I like to say is it's a perfect example of the public school system at work in this area, and the thousands of dollars. We have about $8,000 per student that's put into the schools, the public school system, and so we get a sample of what all that money's bought over the years, and so we get some people that are less than intelligent. And so we just take them as they come. This is live, and so I hope you're not offended. about it.
No.
But anyway, we're going to get to some of the issues here. And one of the big issues, and it always is, it never seems to go away, it has been an issue since roughly about 1970, 72, is the abortion issue. And I want to find out or ask you, for the many thousands of listeners that are involved with that issue, especially in this area, we have Planned Parenthood bearing down on the Eau Claire area to open up an abortion clinic right now. And it seems to be a protracted issue that's going on right now. Where are you at on that issue of abortion and pro-choice, pro-life?
Well, I'm without question a pro-life candidate, and have always been a pro-life candidate. And I think when we're talking about pro-life, we have to underline life. And that's from conception to our most senior of citizens. And I think how we deal with this issue, I think how we deal with life in general along this continuum at both ends also determines how we deal with each other in the middle of that continuum. And I think when we deal with that properly, when we cherish life, we'll see a change in the general attitude about society and how we treat each other as human beings.
Well, from the district, Fred, did you want to say something?
How do you feel about unfunding Planned Parenthood nationally by Congress?
Well, I would say that I do not support government-funded abortions. I think that's wrong. So I would be in favor of unfunding or defunding or deallocating that portion of Planned Parenthood's function.
Very good.
Sometimes it goes in one pocket and comes out the other, but it's the same organization juggling the money. It's like sending money to Russia. It usually ends up in their munitions factories making bombs against Americans.
I think if we are in the process of defunding, if we defund one element of Planned Parenthood, then we need some safeguards. We need some auditing standards that, and I think we should have that with any area in any organization that is using our tax dollars.
What I was suggesting is if, on the state and federal level, if we can't defund Planned Parenthood, start funding some of the pro-life groups for the group homes for unwed mothers, start pouring more money in there, at least bring them up so that they can offset what Planned Parenthood's doing out there with the young women and the young families that are.
Oh, I would be in favor of that.
So that was one way of, if we can't defund them, because there seems to be some.
Wisconsin Right to Life and Pro-Life Wisconsin, the two organizations that would come under that banner.
Unfortunately. Welcome once again to the Cow Report. I'm your host, Chuck Lee, and as usual, coming to you from the beautiful downtown L.E. Phillips Memorial Library and Taco Stand. And right as of this moment, the Loyal Order of the Raccoons, Chapter Number 1, is now in session. And boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about today. And as usual, I want to introduce you to my rusty, trusty sidekick.